Good afternoon, everybody. I hope everybody is well, and welcome to this afternoon's Skills-Share Session on foreign workers, local jobs, and employer risk. I hope that it is turning out to be a peaceful day for everyone. Certainly from my side, there hasn't been too many disruptions. So hopefully that is everybody's experience. We will just give a few more moments just for everybody to, I think, just join. Looks like people are still filtering in from the waiting room. All right, well, it's gone 1 minute past 2, so I suggest we then kick off. So welcome once again, everybody, to this afternoon's session. For those of you who don't know me, I'm Gordon Angus, the Executive Director of the South African Engineers and Founders Association. And please join me in welcoming Mr. Ofentse, a research associate at the Center for Risk Analysis. You guys have seen their work, well, you see their work every Monday. Ofentse focuses on political risk and foreign policy, applying his geopolitical expertise to assess global trends and the implications for South Africa. Welcome, Ofentse, and thanks very much for giving up your time on what I'm sure is quite a busy day for you.
Thanks, Gordon. Yeah, not too busy today. Not too busy. Not like anything is happening, right?
Okay, fantastic. And hosting today again, once again, is Brad Wattridge, senior partner at Hot Mustard. Brad, how are you? Brad, are you with us? There we go.
Yeah, it's a life story. Hey, my internet is like not playing its part today. I think it's joined the march. So, yeah, struggling a little bit. Guys, I'll put my camera on in a sec. I just want to make sure that we can get through the intro and then I'll join visually. But sorry, I missed everything before. Can I hit it, Gordon?
No, I was just welcoming everybody, and I was starting just by commenting that from my side at least, things have been relatively quiet. No particularly nasty reports that I've really heard. So yeah, it looks like it's been a rather peaceful day.
Yeah, if anybody had a braai yesterday or on Saturday, and was standing around the braai, I think we were spelling out the end of South Africa as we know it, and everybody was taking the emergency backpacks and heading to the farm. But we tend to do that as South Africans. I think we're so acutely aware that, on this continent, things can shift within seconds. And, stability for us is not something that is expected. It's something that we feel is a bonus, and it helps us with our businesses. So I think this is a good case in point, and I think we're so spot on with this topic today. So Ofentse, thank you so much for joining us and putting together this amazing presentation, which I think you're going to take us through. And I will stop in between to take any questions. I think this is a great opportunity for us just to if we have something on our minds and we want to talk through this topic, it's a safe space. Pop it in the comment section and let us talk it through. There's no such thing as a silly question. We'll take it, we'll talk through it. And if you have struggled a little bit today, what has your experience been? And yeah, so Ofentse, do you feel, should we head into it? We've got quite a lot to get through, brother.
Yeah, let's get into it. Let me attempt to share my presentation.
Well, Ofentse, while we wait for your brother to share, one of the things I picked up when I was going through the presentation is, we tend to use non-compliance as a business directive. We incorporate it into our strategy and become part of what we do as a company because we know that South African law is not enforced on any level. It kind of makes us a little bit complacent. And then when something like this happens and we singled out within these mobilizations on the streets, et cetera, as those employing what we consider illegal immigrants, it suddenly becomes a little bit of a shell shock and then a huge risk for our business. And I think that's something you unpack quite a lot in the presentation.
Yeah, precisely that, precisely that. So there has been a new employment services bill that has been introduced in the National Assembly and Parliament, not yet law, but it does introduce some harsh enforcement. And because of how South Africans can sometimes be complacent because of the lack of enforcement we have been seeing, I'm going to start off the presentation with the current existing laws. So what is law now that we may have been neglecting and overlooking?
Nice, nice. Oh, we can see your screen. We can see the presentation. Do you want to take us through it?
Sure, let's go. So at the moment, there are 3 levels of risks that are being shown to us, and all 3 of them are live currently. And by risks, these risks are coming from 3 different risk generators. So the topic at hand, although today on the 30th of June, elephant in the room, there are protests happening and worry that it may turn violent. The first risk generator here is national government. So as mentioned, there's a new law that has been pushed, and it's been pushed, and we've seen that there's been political will behind enforcement being implemented alongside to this new bill that's been introduced. Where do we see this political will? With the announcement of 10,000 new labor inspectors. This was first announced in the President's State of the Nation address earlier this year. So there's risk in terms of being compliant and enforcement that comes from national government. The next risk is local and community. So there's pressure that's coming from frustrated South Africans that are being mobilized to protest and in some instances turn violence. And that pressure is added onto not only government, but also businesses that may be hiring, whether legal or illegal foreign nationals. That pressure and that risk is added onto you. And then the last one, which is a bit separate, is a transnational and reputational risk. This risk is mostly geopolitical. The waves of xenophobic violence and anti-immigrant violence being seen all over the world. This has detrimental impacts not only on the government of South Africa, but also on businesses in South Africa, and it can easily turn away investors. I was speaking to a conference organizer who is organizing a conference in a 5-star hotel in a very safe place, but the conference is hosting a lot of international people from America and Europe, and they were too nervous to host it and wanted to move it to Ghana. That particular conference will not be prone to any violence, especially because it's being hosted in October. But this is a real conversation that's being had internationally and for anyone that wants to do business in South Africa. So document compliance protects you against the state, but it does nothing about the street or reputational contagion. So we see this currently happening right now.
And I think one of the things, Ofentse, is what always gets me is, they were saying this morning, today's a normal working day, but we all know the risks.
Yeah.
We, as the citizens on the ground, have identified that regardless of what reassurance we get from government, today is not a normal working day. You just have to walk outside to see that it's not a normal working day. So it's another day is lost. Another revenue opportunity, a growth opportunity for our businesses is lost. And it's not because legislation is outdated, it's because of the lack of will to enforce the law.
Yeah, precisely that. And that's why it's important as well to identify the 3 different risks that are being present, or the risk generators. Compliance will protect you against national government and the risks associated with that. But local community and transnational reputational, that's still live. So yes, it's not a normal day today. And moving on and to what is currently the law. Important to know how to comply now and what to do and not to do. So 3 things no employer may do, and this is whether the new bill is being introduced or not. This is the law currently right now, which is employ an illegal foreigner, a foreigner in the Republic in contravention of the Immigration Act. This is something you can't do. This is law, and it is well known. But even if you don't know, the law will presume that you do already know, and I'll get back to that point later. The second is that if you employ outside permitted status, so there are different statuses given to foreign nationals, not all of them have the same kinds of documentation. So it's important that you stick to the rules of the documentation. Some work permits allow for specific kinds of jobs, and it's important to get those details. And the excuse that I didn't know, again, doesn't apply, and because the law will presume that you do know what the law is. And the third one is that employer off permit terms. So again, if the different kinds of permits are foreigner on terms, conditions, or in a capacity different from their status. So if on your record books it says your employer's on a work visa, but actually they are an asylum seeker, that can damage you, that can add risk to your business. So it's important to know all those things. The employer must make a good faith effort to ascertain that no illegal foreigner is employed and to establish the status or citizenship of those it employs. Stricter compliance is expected of employers with more than 5 employees. So the bigger your company, the stricter the compliance will be. And yes, there must be good faith effort from the employer side that what you're doing is in compliance to the law. And if you're caught red-handed, the law says you ought to know.
Mm. Mm. I think that's a huge point, Ofentse. It's the concept of, do we really need to wait for someone to come knocking on the door to tell us that we're non-compliant? Or should we just rather remain compliant? But then again, it doesn't remove the risk of a group of people entering into your premises forcefully and demanding to see compliance paperwork. That trauma, that disruption, that sense of almost arrogance that they are above the law does cost us as business owners on the ground at the end of the day.
Yeah, precisely that. It's going back to that complacency that we tend to have because the state isn't so good at enforcing its laws. And under the Immigration Act, 2 presumptions operate against the employer. The burden is on you to rebut them, which is the presumption of knowledge. If it is proven you employed someone unlawfully, you're presumed to have known their status, and you escape only by providing good faith and compliance with the verification duty. And the second presumption is the presumption of employment. If an illegal foreigner is found on premises where business operates, they are presumed to be employed by whoever controls the premises. So one thing about work permits as well is that when authorized, they are authorized under you as an employer. So it's always important to check that and to trace that, and also to know who's on site in terms of your operations in engineering or construction, and rebuttal only with prima facie evidence to the contrary. So yeah, the I didn't know is not a defense if you ought reasonably to have known the person's status. You can't hire an illegal foreigner, and if you don't check, it means that if you don't check, you're putting yourself at a risk because the law says you knew their status, whether you did know or not.
Yeah, and Gordon raised a good point. You're saying don't take documents at face value.
Yeah.
Because even if you accept the documents and you don't do your due diligence, Ofentse, will you still be considered as in knowing?
Yes, definitely. So the verification process, very important to do before the job, before hiring anyone. But the verification process is also ongoing, and it's something that has to be done every day by a compliance officer, not just by any regular employee, because someone's status can change any day. Someone's permit may expire, someone may have gotten here illegally but fraudulently got permits. So it's an ongoing performance that you have to do. And when looking at the new bill and what the consequences and the penalties may be, you will see why that stricter compliance from the employer side will become expensive if it's not done.
Yeah.
So starting with the current penalties that's under the current law, not the bill yet, which is that at first strike, there will be a fine or imprisonment not exceeding 1 year. Typically, the fine is more normal than imprisonment in these cases. On a second strike, it's fine or imprisonment of 2 years. And third and above, it would be imprisonment up to 3 years. In this option, there's no fine at all. So if you get caught more than 3 times, then it is straight to jail. And the third strike removes the fine option entirely, as mentioned. So repeat and non-compliance becomes a custodial matter.
Sure.
So after this, we move to the actual bill that has been introduced, which, as scary as being caught 3 times and being sent to prison is, it does actually get worse. And the Employment Services Amendment Bill, the proposals meant in this bill, will do precisely that. It was introduced earlier this year. Important to note that it was introduced this year, so that means the drafting of it took place nearly 3-4 years ago. And it took place under political pressure. So what we're seeing now with the 30 June deadline and the current episode of xenophobic violence and protests, this isn't new. Like any episode, it starts, it ends, and it happens again. So this was a response to a previous episode, all the way building up to what we're seeing today.
Yeah.
So it replaces the old foreign worker rules with a new framework governing employment of foreign nationals. There are 5 duties that are now new in this new bill that you have to conduct when hiring someone. That's to confirm the right to work, test the local labor market first, prepare a skills transfer plan, offer equal terms, and keep copies of permits. We will get to those as we go on through the presentation. Another thing it adds is quota powers. So the government has acknowledged some frustrations from some South Africans that continue to repeat the taken jobs narrative. And now the minister under this new bill, if it becomes law, Minister of Labour will be able to set quotas for specific sectors on how many foreign nationals one may be able to employ. So that would have a huge impact on the engineering and construction sector. But as said, this is only a bill and no quotas have been set up yet. Again, worker protection, a foreign national employed unlawfully still keeps full enforcement rights. So an undocumented foreign national illegally hired will still have the rights as any other normal worker as enshrined in our constitution and also under the Immigration Act. And then penalties have also increased. We will get to that on the very next slide. And then finally, there's a definitional shift of what a foreign national is. Also very important to know these terms in case you do come into some kind of rebuttal and you would need to protect yourself. Also very important to define what a foreign national is. And in this bill, it is redefined to exclude citizens, permanent residents, refugees, and asylum seekers. Quotas bite on a narrower pool, and the recruitment preference pool expressly includes refugees. So there's a tighter, the definition of foreign national is now being slimmed down, and who you hire now is going to become even more important to verify, not only before you hire them, but also while they're at the job. Any questions from here?
No. Yeah, I think Gordon just raised another point. You're saying, please also be aware that even if your employees are not in RSA and working legally, they still enjoy the protection of the Labour Relations Act, which means that any termination of employment must still be in the fairness requirements of the LRA. And then Angie posted a comment, which I'll grab quick. It just came in. Work documents should have an expiry date. What should be done for a long-term foreign employee if that has expired? Should we suspend employment until documents can be presented in a specific time frame? Or should we be employing specialized workers on permit contracts, or trust that they will renew if they're offered a permanent one? So I think it all talks to, your work documents when you come into South Africa generally has a time limit on it. But then how does an employer tackle that? Do they give them temporary contracts so that they're not caught out on that expiry of those documents? Or should they just trust that the employee will renew the documents when they need to?
Yeah, so in terms of having to trust the employee to renew their documents, it is also the employers should also, in protection of yourself, also hold the responsibility of making sure that renewal does happen. So months in advance, you should know when your employee's permit may expire and encourage them to renew it. And if they will no longer be, if you're okay and content with them no longer being employed after that certain date, then no need. But if you would like them to continue to be employed, do push them to extend their permit. And also, you can also write a letter to the Home Affairs vouching for that particular individual.
So you basically have to keep an eye on that.
You have to keep
And
an
you
eye
will
on
still be
that.
held liable if the person's permanently employed and their documents have expired. And I'm sure if there's been no attempt from your side as employer to try and mitigate the renewal, you know, the length of the renewal. In other words, try and be part of the renewal process.
Yes.
So again, Angie was saying, does the LRA or the BCEA apply to them should they not return with paperwork and be able to be dismissed? I think that's a dismissible offense.
It would be dismissible because then it would be the employer that gets the punishment.
Yeah. So maybe, Angie, what we can do, these are like really nice specific questions and maybe a little bit out of my scope. So maybe if we can just get Gordon or Charlene just to comment on that, because I think that's where we can help and assist. But these are such great questions and we really appreciate your feedback. So Ofentse, what's next? We're going to be looking at the penalties,
Yeah.
how they've grown, you know, in terms of a proposed graph, what they're going to be.
Yeah, precisely that. So now we're talking about the bill, the amendment bill. So this is not yet law, but it's always good to know what will happen. So at the moment, when we spoke about the fines that you may get if you're not compliant, the very maximum you can hit in terms of being fined under the current law is 50,000 rand. Under the bill, under the bill, that ceiling has went way up, and now the maximum just for your first contravention, for the first strike, is now 100,000 rand. This is if you're caught employing someone who is in the country undocumented or with the wrong papers. That's the first contravention. Second would be if you're a repeated offender within 3 years, the fine would be 200,000 rand. And after that, 2 priors, it would be a million rand fine. And if not a million rand, it would be 10% of your turnover. So now that this has been included in an immigration law, a turnover linked penalty is a competition law instrument. So the government has noticed that there is a financial incentive in not complying with the law in terms of hiring foreign nationals, because in many instances that we've seen that foreign nationals who are undocumented are treated unequally and they're discriminated against by the employers, and the government is noticing that, and hence why it's now upping the penalties to make it more expensive to not abide by the law. So its arrival in employment law is the signal. Is the signal of that. Non-compliance is no longer a fixed budgetable cost. Some employers do budget this. They do budget to be non-compliant because it ends up being cheaper. In this instance, it can't be cheaper. It's deliberately set so high so that the law may be followed.
Okay.
Yeah. And for
So
mid-sized
sometimes they just pay the fines because it's you can pay the fine, we build it into the cost of having that person.
It's put into the budget. It's put into the budget. That's
crazy.
That's how much criminality has been so ingrained into our systems and our society. It's that now we even budget to not comply, and it's a reality, and the government has noticed. And courts must also strip any economic benefit gained closing the pay the fine and carry on loophole. So again, it's not something you can budget. If the court can prove that you have economically gained out of that, it'll be added onto your respective fine.
Okay, that's interesting. Ofentse, can we've got a few more slides to go, but can I just take a minute here and chat around the concept of a foreign worker with documentation that has expired. So
Sure.
Gordon, if you can unmute, I don't know if you are able to, and just take us through this. So Angie's saying if the employer monitors the work visa requirements, should the onus be on the employer to assist the employee, or should the employer take responsibility to renew at their cost? And then further on, Angie was saying the reason I ask is this: should the work permit expire, then indirectly they would also become illegal immigrant. I suppose it wouldn't be illegal immigrant, it would be undocumented, or
Yeah.
maybe perhaps a different term, but I think we get what Angie's saying, right? Or asking.
Yeah, but remember what Ofentse said. He said that the obligation will continue to exist on the employer to verify that the documentation is valid, is above board, is current, and so on. So, it's not, I don't think the obligation doesn't fall on the employer to cover all the costs associated with keeping the documentation up to date, but it is the employer's responsibility to make sure that the employee keeps that documentation up to date. So that makes sense.
Yeah, definitely. And is there a grace period, Ofentse, on the documentation, and Gordon? Is there a grace period if it expires? Is there, like, if I know this sounds really weird, but if your car license expires, I don't know if that's true. That's how I see it. There's usually a little bit of a grace period. Is it the same with this kind of documentation?
I'm not sure. I haven't come across the concept of a grace period, but I could be wrong. I just haven't come across it.
No, there's no grace period to my knowledge, but what there is, it's a very difficult, well, it's not a difficult question to answer. There's no grace period, but what there is seems to be the continuous renewals of the different types of permits and so on. We've seen the Zimbabwean exemption permit, the ZEPs, for example, being continuously, well, not continuously, but being renewed, and the validity of those permits being extended is probably the correct way to put it, a couple of times. There was a period where even holders of that Zimbabwean exemption permit were not allowed in the country, not allowed to be working, but that all changed. So it's a bit of a moving target, and not all of the documentation is the same for anybody who's outside of South Africa. There's documentation which applies only to Zimbabweans. There's documentation which applies to individuals from other countries. So the safest bet is just to make sure that way before the expiry dates of those documents, the employees are made well aware that they need to go off and address the renewal issue, so that there can be that continuity of the documentation.
Fantastic. So Angie's got a few more questions. Angie, is it possible for you to maybe unmute and just ask your last question verbally? I think that will also help with any misunderstanding. If you are able to, that would be great. Otherwise, we can continue, and maybe you can have an offline conversation with Gordon. Cool. So we're not hearing back from Angie. So I think let's move on. And then, okay, perfect. Angie will connect with you, Gordon. And this is exactly what these sessions are all for, guys, is so that we can ask these questions and work through them. And it might feel a bit itchy and scratchy, but I think this is incredibly healthy as an association, as members, that we talk to each other about this information. So thank you so much for Gordon for coming back in. I really appreciate it. Ofentse, brother, are you ready to carry on, bud?
Yeah, let's go. And I saw Angie's question about the difference between a work permit and a skill-based permit. And the new bill does touch on the importance of the skill of the foreign national that you are hiring, and we will get to that within this slide. So in terms of another risk added onto hiring a foreign national that may be undocumented, it's also important to evaluate the health and safety and security risk. So a foreign national, if injured or killed on site, their papers turn out to be invalid, expired, or fraudulent, they weren't legally our employee, again, is not a defense. Whether they're documented or not, they are your responsibility. And on top of them being your responsibility, it will also expose that you are hiring an undocumented foreigner. So another risk that adds on to that, consideration that must be looked after and looked at. So the duty to provide safe workplace is owed to everyone on site, regardless of their status, whether documented or undocumented, South African or foreign national. And the courts have treated undocumented workers as employees for injury compensation purposes. This is under the Immigration Act. So the bill doesn't even have to include that. This is the current law right now. Moving on to that is the immigration crime. So crime liability for employing the worker without valid papers under the Immigration Act. So if the undocumented immigrant is injured, is hurt, and it does draw attention to your business, this is the risk that exposes that you are hiring undocumented foreigners. And then this escalates the fine that you may receive. So not only would you have to worry about the costs in looking after your worker who is injured or looking after their safety, but if they do get injured or killed on site, another fine will be added for being caught with hiring someone who isn't supposed to be working for you. So all these risks just compounded to being more costly, more expensive. This is the case with the current law, and it'll only become worse with the bill that's coming up. And on top of that, risk that typically gets overlooked, but it can be incredibly consequential if it does occur. You can refer to this as a black swan, even as the reputational cost to a business. If undocumented foreign national is killed on your site and your business's name is attached to that, if it touches either mainstream media or social media, that's a huge reputational damage that can affect your business. So it's something that ought to be looked at, and we shouldn't overlook it. But it's very easy to overlook because we always think those kinds of things wouldn't happen to you, but they very much can happen to anyone. All good?
Incredibly interesting, Ofentse, I must say. Very, very interesting information. And I think it's the kind of information that sometimes you believe you know. And then when you are standing around the braai, people say specific things. And you're like, you know what, I actually don't know this well enough, as well as I should. And I think as business owners, as members, or anybody working at HR, I think we need to know this information incredibly well.
Yeah.
So we can just weigh up the benefits and put it in as part of our strategy. Yep. So thank you so much. And what I like is that you've made it easy for Brad to understand. Sometimes the ADHD kicks in at 2:30 on a Tuesday afternoon. So I really appreciate it. So if there is any further questions outside of this, guys, please remember to reach out to Gordon. He'll put you in touch with Ofentse. They have a really great working relationship. You do have information at hand. You have help and support to navigate this very interesting situation that we're in. Do you want to hit the verification side?
Yeah, let's do that. Verification and due diligence. So this will include what's in the new bill, but also in the existing bill as well. And the first thing you would be wise to do would be an authenticity and type check. So to confirm if anyone's papers are legit and genuine, not forged, as Gordon mentioned earlier. Something very important to do, and you are allowed to do this, because if not, you're the one that's going to have to pay the cost or even possibly face imprisonment. Second thing to look at is employer alignment. So whether the permits are tied to a named employer. So confirm that it's you when the person finally gets their papers right, that if they list you as an employer and not anyone else, or if they have someone else listed where they're technically working for someone else now, trying to get 2 jobs under 1 visa. Third one is occupation match. The work performed must match the role of the permit authorized. So this is another one that needs to be looked at very carefully, because especially under the new bill, because the minister will be able to set quotas. On top of that, there will also be a skill check requirement. And what this basically means is that when putting out the advertisement for a job and you so happen to hire a foreign national, you as the advertiser, you have to have the papers as well to prove that there was no one else within the country, or at least within your vicinity, that had the required skills, the skills that you needed for the particular job, and that a foreign national was the only person you could have hired to fulfill that particular job. And when doing that, when hiring that foreign national, they ought to have the right permit, not just a regular work permit, but one that's focused on a specific skill, if that is the case for that particular role. So the occupation match and the documentation has to match, as well as from the employer side on what you're asking for. If someone else would be able to do that job within the country, then you can't hire a foreign national. But this is under the new bill. So this is not the current law, at the moment in terms of the occupation match and the strictness to it. So very important to look at that, especially after the quotas are going to be set, because this bill will become law. Fourth one is
will become
expiry.
offense. You said will become law.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Sorry,
yeah.
brother. Sorry.
No worries. Yeah, the amendment bill will become law. It is a given because of the pressure that's being put onto the government, but also within the National Assembly when just monitoring the politics of it. All the political parties are for the amendment bill, so it's safe to say that it will become law as it is. Fourth thing to check in verification and due diligence is expiry and conditions. Check the expiry date and every condition attached to the permit. So just keep monitoring the permit when it expires to be able to raise the alarm if it would expire in the next 3 months. You just have to do your part because the law assumes that you are doing your part, whether you are or not. Fifth one, records retention. So keep records. The rules require 2 years after the worker leaves. So records of employment status, records even of the advertisement you sent out in hiring the particular foreign national, just any records attached to that particular individual. Because if it is asked by a labor court and you're unable to prove a particular thing, it would be you that faces the fine. So it depends on what your cost and what's more expensive, keeping track of records or paying a fine of potentially 1 million rand in that particular instance. And the final thing in the verification and due diligence check is ongoing monitoring, as we've been talking about throughout the presentation, which is that to just keep track of your employees and their verification status and whether everything does match, and also the status of a foreign national can be volatile, and they're able to lose that status very easily if they commit a crime or anything else that may go wrong. So not typically that they came in illegally, but also once they're here, they can perform something illegally that gets them off the system and would be forced to be deported. You have to track that. You have to monitor that, and those changes can happen. And when they do happen, you have to be the first one to see, because if not, you'll be the first one to be punished for it.
Yeah. Feel like I need a Jack Daniels.
Make that 2, please.
I'm gonna make it a double today, Ofentse. A double with ice in winter. But I think it's important, though. I don't think any of this is something unbeknown. It's just reaffirming what our responsibilities are and ensuring. And I love the questions that were asked. I think it's, especially by Angie and a few other comments that we had here. I think it's really, really important for us to be aware and reach out and share information with each other. So I know we didn't have a very lengthy presentation which I think is really nice for us. What is the next thing that you would like us to talk through, brother?
Sure. The very final slide is the coordinated enforcement push by the government, which is the bill is the legislative arm of a politically driven campaign. As mentioned, it didn't start this year, it didn't start in May. It built up to this, and now it's becoming a stricter law. So what we can expect moving forward is a tenfold rise in inspection with the announced 10,000 new labor inspectors being recruited this financial year. Enforcement is already happening before the 10,000 new labor laws are being brought in. Inspections have been taking places. Reading the news, having to monitor that, we see that arrests have been already happening across the country. And what's most likely to happen is it becomes law broadly as drafted as it is. If a change does happen, it won't be any noticeable or significant changes. So as it is now, as the bill is, it will typically become law as it is, and the penalties will remain as high as presented in the bill. Quotas land first in high foreign employment sectors. So you'll get this in your mining and also in construction. You'll see that the minister will typically focus first on adding quotas onto those sectors. The adding quotas to the sectors, when reading through the bill, is a process in itself as well. And so there is a 30-day window when a quota is set and when it's finally approved. So you will get the heads up when that happens. But before that even happens, because we know the bill is going to come into law, because we know the penalties are going to be high, because we know there are some sectors that will be targeted. If I have three, have been with me for.
Yeah,
So
I'll
also
tackle it
this,
now, my brother.
we'll tackle it now. Okay, sure. So because we know the bill is going to come into effect, it's better to be proactive now before the government forces you. So have a head count of all the foreign nationals that you are employing. Make sure all their papers are right. If not, what do you need to do? What can you do? So that before these harsher laws come into play, you're already set. You already have your papers, your records are already there. We don't know what the quotas will be yet, but when they do come, you will at least have your record set and your head count made, and you'll be prepared to make any executive decisions once it does become law. So it's better to prepare for it now than when the government forces you to prepare.
Yeah, yeah. So I'd like to use Brandon's comment as a kind of a case study, if that's okay. Then we can work through it,
Sure.
you know, on what do we recommend are the steps. Brandon, just remember that this is our professional opinion within the scope of what we do. But you should always just maybe check in with someone like Gordon before you go ahead. But Brandon was saying, I have 3 employees that have been with me for 20 years. They did have work permits, but over the years, we overlooked their status and they're now without work permits. What can we do? Because this big issue is, Brandon was saying, should we suspend them with full pay until they get it sorted out? And what are the chances of that actually happening? And he just feels a little responsible because they've kind of built their lives in South Africa already. So, you know, it's that obviously that kind of emotional attachment, but then Brandon's also concerned for his business. So he's kind of stuck between this moral decision and this kind of business decision. It's something I suppose, all business owners go through.
Mhm.
What would you recommend to Brandon if you can try and make it like step by step, if you can, within your knowledge and information you have at hand?
Yeah, it is a tough one, and it can also as well get emotional, of course, because of the topic at hand. But the best thing to do would be to weigh the cost and measure your risk appetite. It would be best to measure your risk appetite. So if you are in the geography, in the kind of environment where one of these inspections would would primarily target you, specifically that kind of business, not being sure where it is, but if you're more likely to be targeted by one of these inspectors, then I would say make the hard decisions and do suspend them until they get their papers right. And of course, if you want to, you can do whatever you can to assist them in speed tracking it and financially helping them. But that's after you measure your risk appetite. If your risk appetite says it would be more expensive to keep on keep on hiring them and just face the risk, then you can choose that. But if it would be more expensive to fire them and to go on without a few employers, you just have to measure your own risk appetite in terms of that and what costs less. Currently, we saw the cap for the fines is 50,000, so it's not the 500 up to 1 million that you would face currently. But once the new law comes into effect, those tough decisions will have to be made, and it would be wise to not add any emotional decisions attached to those kinds of tough decisions we will have to make.
Yeah, yeah. And I don't know if I am a place to say this, but I feel like I just want to mention to Brandon that, you know, it definitely takes two to tango in this scenario. So those employees were full aware that their permits had expired. So you know, it's not, I don't want you, it kind of feels like you feel like you're taking on most of that responsibility and that pressure. But there is two of you in the scenario. You're the employer and the employee. The employee's permits have expired and are not valid. You need to make a decision which is in the best interest of your business, because that's what pays for you and your family. And I think anybody in that position would make that decision. I don't know if that helps in any way. Brandon was further saying, by assisting them, do we not admit that we have hired foreign nationals without the proper documentation? Perhaps if I could just say that I think the history speaks for itself. The fact that you have done it means you are complicit. I think, Ofentse, you mentioned that in slide number 2.
Mm.
So just to keep in mind, the slides will be available, if I can
Yeah.
say that, Ofentse and
Yes.
Nicole. It'll be put onto the server, and you guys can go through this in your own time. And of course, again, please reach out to Gordon and to Ofentse if you need any support. Brandon, I would suggest let's just deal with this now, because you don't want this weighing on your mind for long. And there's so much going on right now. So get it sorted, make a decision, and move forward, and then analyze the risk around that decision. Gordon,
Brandon,
do you
if I
want
could come in and just comment on Brandon's, and please forgive me if I repeat some of what may have already been said, because I was trying to answer questions in the Q&A. But you know, I don't know what to call it, but the difficulty created for a lot of employers here is that you've got the Immigration Act, which makes it illegal to employ anybody who's not in the country with permission, effectively. Okay, but at the same time, they still enjoy the protection under the labor regime. So they enjoy the protection of the Labor Relations Act. If you have employees that you know are not properly documented, you may not simply dismiss them. You may not simply use the fact that they're not in the country, with permission as a means to dismiss them, because you could still be held liable for an unfair dismissal under the Labor Relations Act. So I think you need to, what I would advise that you do is that you give them time off, whether that's paid or unpaid is up to you, not obligated to pay them. But give them necessary time off to go and get their documentation sorted, and to keep you informed on an ongoing basis, so you know exactly what they are experiencing in terms of their success in that regard. And if they don't come right within a reasonable amount of time, then you would need to, unfortunately, start looking at a possible incapacity process in order to protect the business, because you don't want to be found to be employing people who you're not supposed to be employing, particularly if there's an inspection or something like that. At the very least, if there is an inspection, you would not want those people to be on site. Okay, you would want them to be off trying to get their permits renewed. And your explanation to the Department of Home Affairs would be, we are in the process of dealing with these employees through a fair process under the Labor Relations Act, but we are well aware that we are not permitted to employ them. That's why they're not here. That's why they are trying to renew their permits. And if they don't come right, we will be, acting fairly in terms of terminating their employment.
Thank you so much, Gordon. You really articulated really well. I hope we didn't give any misinformation out. I think we're just all giving them.
No, not
perspectives.
at all. I just don't, it's a really difficult situation.
Yeah.
I'll leave it there.
I feel
Maybe not offer my personal views too much, but the reality is that you've got to almost play this balancing act of making sure that you're compliant with the Immigration Act and at the Labor Relations Act. In many ways, they are somewhat contradictory. So you just got to be careful, but at all times be able to show that you are following a reasonable process to act fairly and within the bounds of all applicable legislation. But we can obviously take that discussion further offline, Brandon, in terms of your specifics.
Yeah, thank you so much for that offer, Gordon. Ofentse, brother, are we wrapping up, or is there anything else you want to take us through, Botti?
We can wrap up here. I can just share some final thoughts on the political risk aspect of it, which is that the pressure is now on the government to add onto this enforcement that the public and the local actors, that second political risk generator, the local community and local actors have been calling for. And now national government is responding. So the complacency South Africans we have all had for quite some years now, that needs to be a thing of the past, because the political pressure is working per se to those that are applying the pressure onto the government. So tough decisions will have to be made, because the political will, something we've never seen in a while from government, but now political will to enforce the law is now being shown explicitly, especially with these new inspectors that are being brought out in huge numbers, and we can expect more as well to be announced in the future. So look at the political pressure and translate it to pressure being added onto yourself as well, on whether you should be complying or whether you are compliant or not, to also just look back at your current staff and see if their papers are right.
Fantastic. Ofentse, that was quite a meaty one to get through today.
Yeah.
But
Yeah, it was. It
yeah,
was.
I
And
kinda-
also, because of the current situation at hand, it can also be emotional because we're talking about people's lives as well.
Yeah, yeah. It's just a river that separates us generally, isn't it? If you think about it.
Yeah.
Yeah. So, yeah, I think there's a lot of social elements to it, and I think we're all also highly sensitive, and it's just this cluster of, emotions and law and labor and everything. But I think you've really unpacked it nicely for us, and you've kept it strictly what the law says, what's in the best interest of the business, which I really, really appreciate. I see your email is on screen, so if you don't mind, I could just say to anyone they can reach out to you within reason. And Gordon's also very much available. Yeah, I think we can wrap up nicely. We just have one last question, if you don't mind. We can just tackle it from Samo. How does keeping illegal employees affect their Provident Fund and UIF claim if they have been employed for years and the employer forgot or didn't follow up with their legal status? Don't know if you want Gordon to grab that, or do you want to grab that, Ofentse?
No, that's a good one. That's a blind spot from me. I've never thought of that.
Okay, Gordon, would you mind to step in here, Botie? Because I think you're
Sure.
probably quite apt to give us feedback.
Yeah, Chioma, my suspicion is that they might run into, they being the employee, might run into problems in terms of claiming their funds if they don't have the necessary documentation. But it would be best to get a confirmation directly from MIBFA. I can certainly assist you with that.
Okay, oh, there we go. Perfect. Nice. Guys, again, I'd like to say thank you very much. We are a few minutes early, but I think it's a good time to close. I think we all need a little bit of a rest and recovery from today. Ofentse, once again, thank you so much for making yourself available. I saw Chris on one of the news channels, and I think you guys must be incredibly busy today and over this week. I suppose there's never a crisis, right? So you must always be busy in some way.
Yeah, exactly that. It's a funny business model we have.
But in a way, I feel like you enjoy it.
I do. Just trying to help where I can help as well, and to bring some understanding.
Yeah, absolutely, absolutely. So again, guys, I'd like to say thank you very much. We're going to be handing it over to Gordon just to close for us. Gordon, I nearly said closing prayer. Lord, I don't know what I was thinking, but anyway, sorry, but that's what
I
I
don't
nearly
think that's a
said.
bad idea at all, actually.
Thank you so much, guys.
We could all use a little bit of prayer. But guys, thanks very much. Ofentse, really, really appreciate your insight. Really, really helpful and incredibly thorough as usual. So thanks very, very much once again. And yeah, to all the members, if you do have issues, please reach out to us, and we'll certainly try and assist you in whatever way we can. All right. Thanks very much, everybody. Well, enjoy the rest of the afternoon and hope to see you again soon. Thanks very much, everyone.
Thank you all.
Thanks so much, Gordon.
Thanks, Brad.
It was a good session, and thanks for your feedback and commenting. It really, really helped.
Sure.
Yeah, you've got such great expertise in this space. I think it's something really we can benefit from.
100%, no problem.
Cool, and we'll catch up soon. Take care,
100%.
Edward. Cheers.
Perfect. Thanks very much. Thanks, Brad. Cheers.
Bye.
Thanks, everyone. Thanks. Cheers. Bye.
Cheers, guys.